Hey everyone, today I'm creating a series of 20 cards in a mini slimline shape, and I'm going to use the SheetLoad of Card templates for September 2024. I am part of the creative team, and so there'll be a playlist below where you can get access to all of the other creative team's videos and watch them through. We all take a totally different approach every month. I also want to give a big shout out to Karen Aiken, and it was her painted mountain cards that inspired the sketch. I'm going to be using Honeybee Studios Vitamin C pack today. I used 10 sheets out of this 24 pack to make 20 cards. Now, I did make a bit of an adjustment to the card layout. I followed most of it, but I did a few tweaks to the sizes of the pattern paper that I used, and it was a complete coincidence that it ended up being I would get 2 full cards out of the 6 by 8.5 honeybee paper. This has an interesting Z fold on this card, so I just wanted to show you here that I'm using my scoring board and I've cut the cardstock down to 7 inches by 6 1/4. This is going to make a standard mini slimline card, which is 6 1/4 by 3 1/2. And it fits perfectly, if you're in the US, into like a banker's envelope or a check envelope. And in Australia, they're a little trickier to find the envelope sizes, but I'll try and put some links below if anyone's trying to find the perfect size for this style of card. You'll notice here that I've done the little Z fold and then I'm using my bone folder to make sure that it's nice and sharp. So because I use the scoreboard, everything lines up perfectly, but I just fold it, use my bone folder, and then I found that the cards themselves, they do stick up a little bit because I'm using quite heavy cardstock. Oh, by the way, I'm using different cardstock this time. This is, I think it's called Franchville, and it is from Spotlight in Australia. And I got it on sale, I think it was about 40% off, and I'll put a link below. Instead of Australian A4, it's letter size paper. So if you love making A2 size cards, it is absolutely perfect, and it is excellent for doing all kinds of inking techniques on it too. It's kind of similar to Nina Solar White, and I really enjoy it. I've been using it a little bit lately. Now I'm cutting down my pattern paper, and I did pick out the designs that I really liked the best, and then I worked from there. I'm cutting down 1 inch, 1.5 inch, and 1 3/4 inch. At the time, I really had no clue that doing 2 of each of those added up to 8.5 inches. I didn't even get 2 cuts out of each, or 2 pieces the same size out of each. I literally grabbed the paper, chopped it down, made sure that I was kind of making a few of each size, so I had a bit of a mix, and then I counted them all up, figured out how many more I needed to chop down, and I was able to use a couple of extra pieces of paper to get some of the bigger pieces for the card layout. So it all was a happy accident and worked out really well in the end. In order to match up all of the different pattern papers, I decided to lay them out color-coded. So you can see I've got the brown ones at the top, the bright teal blue, and then the sort of more mid-tone blue, and then the ones that are kind of greenish and grey at the bottom. This meant that when I was matching all my colors up, I ended up really creating some cards that look quite different from each other. I didn't try and make sure I had one from each stack. I did some with brown tones, some that were a mix. And to make my life easier, I tried to make sure that at the end I had a few left of different ones, and I was flipping them over, flipping them backwards, trying to make sure that I had one of each color tone that would match together. It did get a little bit tricky. I ended up switching around these ones a few times, but overall it was a really interesting way to create the cards, because normally I would do things that actually look very similar and I would create bulk of the same, but this time I just chopped up the paper that I liked, laid it out on my desk, and then you can see my little pile on the side where I put them in the group of 3, and then I worked through creating each card using the design that I had already pre-picked. So I certainly still did things bulk style, but the actual color coordination and creating was super fun. Now you can see here I am creating these cards. I've already put double-sided adhesive on the back of these using my ATG. And the bigger piece goes here under the flap. That's the 1 3/4. On the top is the 1 inch. And then on the right-hand side, I have used the 1.5 inch. So these are super quick to put together. It is just the 3 pieces of pattern paper. And you can see under that flap, it doesn't quite go the whole distance, but because the way I'm going to glue it down to create a little flap that sticks up a little bit, it'll make more sense in a minute, you don't see all the way in. So I was able to conserve a little bit of paper that way. The other cool part about this as well is, as part of the original sketch, I believe it's intended that when you put your sentiment on the front, if you use a circle like the card layout, then you put another circle directly below it to write your message inside the card. But what I've actually done is I've used the 1 3/4 inch piece on the inside of the card or under the flap instead of a 3 1/4. And what that means is on the inside of the card itself, there's a bigger space to write your message, and I don't need to do the double layering of the circles to create that space. I think in a moment I actually do open up one of the cards to show you, so when we get to that point, hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense. Now you can see here I'm struggling a little bit as I'm messing around with my new die cutting machine, but I got myself one of the Spellbinders Scout die cutting machines because it's really small and I can put it on my desk and I can run little dies through really easily. So this was my first time trying it out, and it takes a little bit of getting used to because you have to hold it in place. Mine was sort of skipping around my desk a little bit because I was just at an awkward angle, hadn't quite figured it out. But it die cut absolutely beautifully. I ran through and did my matting layers for my sentiments that I'm going to pop on top of these cards, and it was really, really quick. I do have 2 sets of my circle dies, so when I got to the next size circle, I did grab 2 of them and I ran through 2 at a time. But the surface of that cutting plate when you are creating bulk cards is absolutely perfect. And I loved that I didn't have to go down the other end of my craft space and use my full-size die machine. So you'll probably see that pop up a few more times in videos as I show you different techniques and things that I do with it. So far it's been going really well. All right, here I'm using scrapbook.com 1mm stamp foam, craft foam, and it is double-sided, and I put a full piece on the one on the right, and on the other I cut it into pieces a little bit and left some gaps. If you're wanting to conserve your supplies, I think you wouldn't really need to put a full strip, so I thought I would try that out, and both of them worked just fine. In the end, I did decide, though, that I was going to take a different approach, and I'll explain that in a moment. I can see here I am creating my sentiment for the top of these cards, and I do have my measurements here for you. So the circle sentiment in the middle, which this is the Lawn Fawn Magic Messages stamp set. I'll link everything that I've used below, so if you're looking for it, it's easy to find. Then I've cut that out with a 1 3/4 circle. And then there's a 2 inch, which is the craft circle. And then I matted it again on a 2 1/4 white. So the reason that I do this, and you can see here I've got them standing up. Hopefully I open one. Do I not open one? Okay. I have put the craft layer in between because when I mat things with white layers, I like to have the white for anything else that I'm adding on top as an embellishment. So I guess I double layered it is how I approached the sentiments for these cards. And I think it brought just a really nice plain color that I could use for all of the cards because I knew it matched the paper pad itself. So I didn't have to muck around with different colors. It's a nice neutral and it worked out absolutely perfectly. Now here is where I changed my approach, and instead of using the double-sided foam tape, which I try and limit usage of it and just use things that are recyclable, I decided to use these strips that I had left over from when I was cutting card bases on a previous project. Originally I folded it in half, but then it stuck up way too much, so I chopped them in half, glued them together, and then you can see here I'm just attaching it under the lip. A little bit of glue in between the pieces, on top and below, and then I really held it down with my wrist and it stuck absolutely perfectly, and love it. It was absolutely perfect. Here we go. I'm finally showing you where you can write your message in the card. Because I use the smaller piece on the side, it looks perfect from the front when closed, and there's plenty of space to write your message without needing to do anything fancy on the inside. It was interesting when I figured out what to put on front of these cards. I finished them and then I did the sentiment the next day. You can see here just by putting a little bit of liquid glue and then adding the sentiment circle to the middle and making sure it's nice and straight, I haven't had to add anything underneath it to keep it flat because it's really not big enough for it to get wobbly. I have put a link here to another video that I think you might enjoy. Have a great day.